Hello, welcome, and thank you for being here this evening for our lecture with our esteemed visiting artist, Daniel Bozkov. Daniel is a Bulgarian-born artist based in New York City. He employs a variety of media from fresco to performance and video and works with professionals from different fields to activate the public space. He enters the worlds of genetic science, department megastores, world-famous tourist sites, and others as an amateur intruder and visitor who also functions as a producer of new strains of meaning into seemingly closed systems. Daniel is a recipient of the Rome Prize from the American Academy and grants from the Foundation for Contemporary Art, Andy Warhol Foundation, and the National Endowment for the Arts. And most recently, as of yesterday, the Guggenheim Foundation, a new Guggenheim Fellow, so... Drinks are on Daniel tonight. His work has been presented at MoMA PS1, the Queens Museum, New York, Santa Monica Museum of Art, Los Angeles, as well as international exhibitions such as the 33rd Sao Paulo Biennial in Brazil, the 6th Liverpool Biennial of Contemporary Art in the United Kingdom, the 6th Mercosur Biennial in Porto Alegre, Brazil, the 9th Istanbul Biennial in Turkey, and the 1st Moscow Biennial of Contemporary Art in Russia, among a million other shows that I'm not going to list or read. Bozkov is a full professor of art at Hunter College in New York City. He's taught as a lecturer at Columbia University, Yale University School of Art, as well as a visiting critic at the Rijksacademy in Amsterdam, Netherlands, and the Royal Institute of Art in Stockholm, Sweden. On a personal note, this is the third time that we've had Daniel Bozkov as a visiting artist. He was the first visiting artist that I brought here when I became a department head at Cranbrook, the head of the print media department. He's the first person I thought, because he gave me one of the best studio visits of my life, and I was very eager to share that with students. Some of you out there today have been fortunate enough to have some studio visits with him over the past couple days, and I think you'll agree. I hope you'll agree. So with that, my friend, Daniel Bozkov.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah, or should I speak louder? Is that good? Thank you so much, Cooper. It's such a treat to be here and privilege. Rebecca and I last night we were talking about this. I just got the news about the Guggenheim, so it's kind of the best place to receive an award being among peers and people you were kind of in dialogue with. So I'm showing quite a few things tonight, so I'll try to be kind of expeditious with that, and we'll have time for questions as well. But if you have any kind of inclination in the middle of a piece to kind of shout, I don't see you almost at all, but if you make another kind of sign or say something, I'll hear it, and maybe you can ask me something in the middle of the whole flow. So I want to start with a piece that I did in Austin, Texas, and it's called Brief Scenario for Disappearance. Hello, we are at the Lab of Metamaterials at the University of Austin, Texas, talking to Dr. Andrea Alu, Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering. And we're going to talk about metamaterials and also invisibility. Invisibility, because it has been in the mind of many people for many centuries, because invisibility has something to do with how we perceive the world and how we how we see the world, but how we understand the world. In English, even when you say "I see," you actually mean "I understand." So seeing and knowing seem to be parallel somewhat.
This is how a new field of science and technology has effectively started. The field of meta-materials, or materials man-made that have properties that can go far beyond or transcend the ones of natural materials.
So Dr. Allo, when he talks about metamaterials, the concept of matter in this case, are we talking about something beyond the physical world? Is it like something almost like bordering metaphysics or something? Is it something that's actually almost like transcends the nature of reality?
No, we still stay within the realms of physics and what is allowed by physical laws of nature, but we go beyond what nature offers us. So the beauty of this new field of science and technology that has been around for about 15 years is to try to combine materials that are available today, but realize emergent properties from this combination. So typically we have been used for centuries to mix materials together. We create mixtures in many different fields of chemistry, of physics, material science. But typically this mixing allows you to just get an average of properties from different materials. So you don't really go beyond what nature offers, you just get something that is in between.
By carefully controlling the composition, shape, and arrangement of artificial molecules, they could achieve this effect that was considered impossible.
Can you say a couple of words more specifically about how does that work? What does it mean controlling the specific shape?
Yeah, so what we do in the area of metamaterials is to...
I'll move on for the sake of time because I want to show a few pieces. The structure of this piece is very simple, actually. It's an interview with a couple of cameras. And what I wanted to do is basically, I took a TED lecture of the scientist, Dr. Andrea Alu. And the TED lecture is about disappearance because with the materials, he's basically, his own whole kind of research is about, again, disappearance and these new materials that maybe provide a possibility for that. So the TED talk was like maybe a couple of years before my actually personal encounter with Dr. Alu. And my idea was basically to ask Dr. Alu now to evaluate or talk with or against the Dr. Alu from 2 years before. Because again, his research project had moved. He, at some point in the talk, he basically says like physics doesn't like disappearance or something like that. You know, it's sort of almost like anthropomorphizing something that's actually a whole kind of, you know, like a law of thermodynamics or something, you know. So it was a kind of interesting dialogue between an interviewer, which in this case is just my beard, so there's no brain there, and these two versions of the same person who actually moved on with in their kind of discourse and research. So the project was actually part of a ongoing, something that happened in UT Austin for maybe a couple of years. And this is another scientist, Brian Corgo, who is basically a nanotechnologist. And as part of our work together, he allowed me to build, this is basically his office in UT Austin. His lab of nanomaterials is almost like right next door, basically a couple of doors from this door. And this is the place he usually kind of meets with his PhD students or you know, his personal kind of books are there and all that. But he had this kind of, it's a lovely new building, so it's a very tall kind of, not huge office, but quite tall. So he allowed me to build this kind of like a loft with a bed. And so for like 3 months, I actually lived there. And it's part of this ongoing project called the Institute for Higher Listening. So we'll be talking during the day. He comes very early. We'll have breakfast, and then we'll have moments of this kind of discussions. When a very busy person kind of is in the, I can see it here with Rebecca and Cooper as well, like when you're in the middle of your, it's very hard to kind of parse a little bit of time to, so once you know, because I was embedded there, actually we have this kind of like a short moments in the morning when we can actually do something. So it became this kind of regular exchange of ideas, and I might talk a bit about that later, but I mentioned to some of the people I did the studio with, I'm very interested in that territory where artists and scientists are kind of have something in common in relationship to the unknown or the proximity to the unknown. So that sort of, not comfort exactly, but ability to withstand kind of unknown sort of situations or problems is a very vital kind of mindset that it's great to encounter other people who are not in your field to actually kind of think along with them, think with. This is the building. You can see the loft up there. You can probably even see the bed, you know, that one lit structure. The whole idea basically was really to inhabit the building properly. I mean, I don't only sleep there. There is a shower. There was a kitchen where I would cook. So it was like kind of fully operational. In this whole building, I was kind of the only overnighting kind of tenant or inhabitant. And these are, when you're there and you live there, these are the situations you come across like at like 3 in the morning, where the cleaning people come in and they come with this kind of gear and stuff. So, you know, there were that type of unpredictable set of interactions that became slowly kind of engendered that work. And this is our basically almost every morning, Brian and I would go to his kind of research. This is the research part of this other office, and we just kind of talk about different things that. One of the things that in his lab is kind of we produced a little bit, and he was kind of a side part of his project had to do with this material called. What is this material called? It has a beautiful name that I'm spacing out at the moment. I'll tell you in a minute. But it's a material, it's called aerogel. And it's a material basically that's 99.9% air. But its other molecular structure is very strong. So Caltech, in the maybe 2005, kind of invented it as part of one of their missions. And it's basically a material that's used in space to actually catch small comets in a way that otherwise, when the comet goes through the atmosphere and the stratosphere and all that, it kind of burns and it changes its kind of composition. While if it goes through into aerogel, that kind of stops it in it, it's pretty much intact. So it's a kind of a really strange material. When you hold it, it's almost like really holding a piece of air. It doesn't have not only weight, but it's kind of almost doesn't exist in a weird way, like a projection or something. So anyway, this is one of the things he will do, and then we'll
energy to break up those oil and water.
Sorry, we'll meet in the morning, and then we'll have this short sessions that often they were learning sessions for me or opportunities to ask questions, or also here at some point to actually together to try to envision this sort of, we call it advanced nanotechnology for beginners. Almost like if one imagined like some kind of future textbook that he wanted to do anyway, what would the form of that be? Many textbooks in the science world are super boring, meaning not that content is boring, but somehow the kind of the paradigm used, like a Photoshop, Illustrator, all this other medium are kind of like used in this one particular way, and it's just like a absolutely opaque, information, not communicative. So with Brian and I talked about like if you need to talk about some kind of like quantum situations, can you use dancers? Can you use other other forms of kind of imaginary. So this was one of those moments, encounter that two of us were able to kind of like discuss that.
Break up those oil and water droplets and
Right.
force them to mix, but over time they separate again, and that's entropy at work. I just take this string and drop it on the ground, it's not going to lay perfectly straight. It's going to be coiled and tangled. So that's another consequence of entropy. If you followed the path of this string, it would actually be following a random walk. And to straighten this string out takes energy to overcome that entropy. So for example, you can tell the string itself wants to stay coiled because you and I have to essentially pull to stretch this straight. This is this absolutely straight configuration is the absolutely lowest energy state of this string. What I've drawn here is a relatively big volume. There are a number of configurations of these tiles. Some include this ordered arrangement, but most of them are random arrangements where they're all over. So these tiles don't tend to have any ordered structure. So entropy is creating disorder in this system. But if I shrink the volume down and confine these tiles into a smaller volume, okay, they can still take on these disordered arrangements. I shrink it even further, and at some point, a disordered configuration of those tiles won't fit in the volume. The only way that those tiles can fit in the volume is for them to order into this periodic arrangement. So now, there's not just one configuration of tiles in this square that's drawn here. There are a few, but every single arrangement is actually an ordered arrangement of these tiles, just with a little bit of, we call it local disorder.
This is another piece that actually happened as kind of this series of several works, also in UT Austin, which has this amazing entomology department. And the piece is called Praxilla, My Bumblebee Queen. And it's actually a mausoleum for one single bumblebee queen and everything that entails. This is sort of like pretty much kind of a small room with this glass container where this one bee was kind of presented. And one of the ideas was basically to take a bee from the collection, and usually they're presented by numbers and by the dates they're collected, and actually give her a name that is sort of like a more relevant name somehow, you know. And then I'll tell you a bit about the story after that, but like the name I started with is the name Praxilla, because Praxilla of Sicyon is one of those ancient Greek poets that only we know about her, only like 3 lines have survived from her poetry, because a male poet 500 years after she lived, I think she's like a 500 BC. So this male sort of, not even a poet, but kind of, he's called nomologist, categorizer of what happened in the past, put her there as a kind of example in his classification as a incongruity, like as silly as Praxilla of Sicyon. So even in contemporary Greek, you can say that, like don't be silly like the Adonis of Praxilla or something. I'll tell you more specifically the story, but and part of it was actually working with a glass manufacturer there. They have like a science glass, amazing department, to create this container to house the bee. Bumblebees are amazing species. This is the local species of bee of the United States, basically. All other bees, some beekeepers would call it European bee or something. You know, this is the native species. It has a very strange kind of cycle of everybody dies before the winter, but the queen. And the queen goes somewhere and nobody knows. And that one single impregnated queen in the next spring gives birth to the new generation. So I don't know how that's even evolutionary, how does it make sense? Because everything is attached to this one individual. If she dies, what happens? You know, no new queens, because the new queens are kind of born out of, from her. So I was really kind of startled by that kind of amazing story. And I work with incredible ethnologists, expert on bee, Professor Charlene Jia. And here there is a little snippet that she talks about this particular bee. What happened?
6801, and a barcode which is associated with this number so that we can scan her and figure out what box she belongs in, and also all of the other information about her is associated with that number. She's a long-faced bumblebee, meaning that from the top of her head to kind of her jaws is very long compared to other bumblebees. And if you look closely at her face, you can see some really interesting characteristics. So in addition to this very long face, all of the hair on her face is dark black, and that's also very characteristic of her species. We can tell from looking at the hair on her face and around the rest of her body that she's fairly young. The hair is very bright, it's not dull in color. Bee hair is very special because unlike many other insects, it's branching hair, and so it's very sensitive. It's their way of feeling the environment and also collecting pollen. So because the hair branches, it's very good at kind of capturing static electricity and using that to hold pollen to itself. So if we look at her face, we can also see that she's got two types of eyes. She has compound eyes, two large compound eyes on the side of her face, and three small ocelli at the top of her face. And these are simple eyes. The ocelli are simple eyes, kind of like human eyes, with a single lens. And they're very good for navigating in low light conditions, like inside her colony.
There was also a small piece of aerogel inside that enclosure that housed the bee. And the main point, or how to say, the main working mechanism of that object was, together with a glassmaker, we used actually an old process called silver mirroring. And actually the back part of the object is actually, has a kind of like mirror that, and the front part has this kind of very magnifying sort of like a lens. So basically, the way it works, you go there and most of the time the bee is out of focus and you have to kind of, really adjust until you find the absolute moment when the whole thing becomes super clear. And you see the aerogel and also see the bee. And then at that moment when the bee is in focus, you also see your face upside down behind her. So it's a kind of a trippy, kind of sci-fi, almost like moment of kind of instrument for looking, but almost like looking into yourself or something, Hard to represent, it's almost impossible. And again, the whole idea was basically to come almost like face to face. Usually a bee is the size of, you look at the whole thing, it's over there somewhere. Like this was like almost like, can you have a head-to-head encounter? And here's like I'll tell you about this in two different ways, but one is, so this poem by Praxilla of Sicyon, of the 3 lines, assumption is those things were actually hymns and they were sung. So with a young scholar of ancient Greek, we had this moment where he taught me how to sing that. So he's basically singing the hymn to Adonis by Praxilla, and then I'm kind of repeating. So the 2 voices are kind of chasing each other in a way. And the second part of this video is another scholar of ancient Greek who basically comments on the text. He's looking at a certain compendium of text and says there is a little kind of story about, so those are the 2 things we're going to see now.
Kalliston menego,
Kaleston menego,
lepo fauste elioio,
lepo fauste elioio,
deuteron,
deuteron,
astrapaena,
astrapaiena,
selena ieste prosopon,
selena ieste potopon,
selena ieste prosopon,
selena ieste prothopon,
ede kai hora ius,
ede kai hora iuth,
secuus,
secu youth,
kai mela,
kai mela,
kai onchnas,
kai onchnas.
Zenobius is a problematic text, but that's century 4, item number 21. He's what we call a nomologist, a collector of sayings, or a paroemiographer. Paroemia is usually translated as saying or a proverb.
Right.
And so a scholar of, I think, the 1st century BCE, who, as part of his business, just culled all sorts of proverbial bits of language from available texts from oral tradition.
Right.
And then he collects them roughly alphabetically. And so this would have been organized under the first letter eta. And then he explains what the meaning of the saying is. So here's the saying: sillier than the Adonis of Praxilla. And then this tells us why would you say that? You apply it to the literally sort of mindless or stupid people.
Kallis,
So again, the hymn to Adonis, Adonis goes to the underworld to look for his partner. And at that moment when he goes down, the shades in the other world are asking him, like, so what is the best thing you left upstairs? And here's those 3 lines come in. And it says, like, the best thing I left upstairs is the light of the sun. And then the second best is the moon and the shining stars. And the 3rd line, but also ripe cucumbers, apples, and pears. So for that kind of like an incongruity of putting cucumbers with stars is where that whole kind of how Praxilla survived in kind of canonical history. This is a piece called Flag.
Ireland, Delaware, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. That's it.
Who wrote The Star-Spangled Banner?
Frank K. Scott.
What is the national anthem of the United States?
Star Spangled Banner.
Who was the president during the Civil War?
Abraham Lincoln.
What did the Emancipation Proclamation do?
Free the slaves.
Which president freed the slaves?
Abraham Lincoln.
What are the 49th and 50th states of the Union?
Alaska and Hawaii.
Who were America's enemies in World War II?
Germany, Italy, and Japan.
Who was Martin Luther King Jr.?
Civil rights leader.
What are the colors of our flag?
White, red, and blue.
How many stars are on our flag?
50 stars.
What color are the stars on our flag?
White.
What do the stars on the flag represent?
The 50 states.
How many stripes are on the flag?
13 stripes.
What color are the stripes?
Moving on for the sake of time. This single object, the piece is called I Love You More Than I Can Say, which in this broken glass, I don't know if you can see it, but if you kind of adjust yourself in a particular way, you can almost read it, but you read it like in all this broken kind of, one is upside down, the other one is in reverse. So it takes kind of a minute to kind of connect to the text. This is an old work which I thought to include, and I'll be quick with that, but it's called Training in Assertive Hospitality, and it started with the fact that I worked as a greeter in a Walmart, and then with the help of the other greeters and with the permission of the store, this is my training with a senior greeter, Bill. And I was actually very interested in this greeter's vest has all these promises here. Our people make a difference. May I help you? All that. So the greeter is really this kind of strange character that kind of, not like, in a weird way, first of all, they say hello to you, and also they're supposed to navigate if you have any questions or, try to find something, the greeter can take you to that. The other part of the unknown part of the greeter's job is there series of buttons near the greeter station, and if there is any kind of like a code amber or something like that that needs to, the greeter has a power to shut the whole store. So it has this strange kind of like it's between a guard and a host. And I was very interested when I encountered it for the first time, and actually I was in Germany, in Düsseldorf, and there was this program on German television talking about Walmart and the greeters, and the program very excitedly talked about that kind of particular position of somebody who is helping you navigate. And so I was very interested in that kind of like when you're paid to say hello or good morning, and people know that, how is that still it's sort of that, what happens to that space, that problematic kind of, and very soon, in my experience, like you become Daniel the people greeter, so everybody knows you, and it becomes, after a while, actual greeting. So that's the greeting part. The other part was actually with the help of other greeters to make this fresco in the back, which I'm going to tell everybody about. Welcome to Walmart. Welcome to Walmart.
Excuse me, can you tell me where I find crafts and yarn?
Yes, this way.
Okay.
All the crafts, the stamps, and the other materials, right?
Yes, and yarn.
Yeah. Over there. Okay. It's kind of beyond the.
Beyond that there?
It's sort of like towards the end of this, I think.
Oh.
I was doing the same thing.
If you spend more time in Walmart, and the whole thing is changing anyway, but there is this very particular tone of everything. Very shabby thing look kind of, suddenly they kind of woken up with some kind of a light. So, and at the same time there's this kind of dread or, kind of monotonous ring that happens. The fresco had like a 12 panels, and there it's actually in the layaway department, which probably now not every Walmart has, and is the place that you can actually, if you can't afford to buy something, you can pay very little and then they store it for you. So the images were this kind of on this even sort of shelves almost, democratically dispersed, where all these kind of bits and pieces from the life in that area, like local churches and celebration of 4th of July. Somewhere in the center is my mother and daughter at that time, other family scenes. Fresco is an amazing sort of, the colors are like really bright here, but it's more subtle in color. But it's, fresco definitely has this kind of luminosity. It's an ancient painting method that actually you use just pure pigment and water, and you apply it on wet lime, and you have this limited time to paint. So it has this kind of expedience, and it's almost like a time-based medium. It's very interesting kind of, if you ever had the chance, you should try it. So anyway, when you look at old frescoes, they have it, but even, that kind of like glow or that kind of inner luminosity, where the, almost like the ground is kind of, as if there is a light behind it or something, So the piece actually acquired its true form, and this is not something I envisioned in the beginning. It's just more like a slowly the world took over, which is a very important part of my work actually. Not the work only itself, but what happens to it once you put it outside of the guarded Platonic context that we usually see art. What happens to it, how people are kind of dealing with it, interacting with it, seeing it or not seeing it, So in this case, at the layaway department, they need at some point the space more and more. So every time I go there will be another pile of things or another, sometimes covering most of the wall. So I recognize that as part of this ongoing kind of morphology of the work. It's sort of like something is there and it keeps kind of evolving. And in many cases, you can completely miss that there is something there. It's kind of like a... So 4 years later, after I painted the piece, so this is at the moment when it was painted, soon after when it was painted, and this is 4 years later. So obviously the whole thing got kind of, not badly damaged, but definitely kind of aged. And at that point, I invited the Italian restorer Renato Giangualano, who recently had restored Tiepolo frescoes in Brescia, in Italy, and to help me to make this kind of restoration evaluation report. And he was kind of working on that kind of professional, how you actually judge how something needs kind of restoration or conservation, or there is a very tight kind of table of terms that conservators use of what needs what. And in that process of kind of like applying language and also the kind of analysis of the state of the work, he came with the word abrasiones in Italian, and he basically said that like maybe those are the most important parts of the work. And so, for instance, that big line that's on the bottom, you know, this long line, that's not like it's not like a crack in the plaster or some sort of technological kind of failure. It's more like somebody kind of pushing a big refrigerator this way and not absolutely seeing that there is something else there. It's that kind of, and the abrasions are where these two worlds that don't necessarily belong together, they kind of meet and sort of score each other in a way. So Renato basically, in Renato's evaluation, the abrasions are the ones that needs to be preserved, like so that they don't. So anyway, I mean, that was the training in assertive hospitality, which kept developing with the fact that Walmart that approved certain kind of palette for the work to match the palette originally, that was the palette of all the stores, like gray and blue, actually changed their palette globally. And you know, when Arkansas decides all the Walmarts anywhere in the world will change the kind of palette. So it's from, you can see the transition from gray and blue to beige and tan. So the manager of that store basically contacted me and said, like, do you want to, you know, it doesn't belong there anymore, so do you want to take it? And it was kind of on panels, so it actually worked. But this is the wall of the fresco after I took the fresco off. This is the next iteration of it. And this is, for me, this kind of like a one stage of the whole piece, is this kind of double monochrome that has that kind of almost like buried reality underneath, but it's actually non-visible, and it's kind of, in a weird way, kind of removed. This happened here in 2018, and I was invited again as a visiting artist, and I did this piece called Lost Fox. So at the print media department at that time, we made this kind of we worked on two different things. One was this kind of silk screen announcement, printed proper silk screen in several colors. And also the other one was actually an etching. The silk screen we put around in local places. Trader Joe's didn't allow us to do that, but other places were open. And I don't know if you can read it there. Can you read the words? Yes or no? Yes. Can somebody read them? Would you be willing to? Who can read them? One person.
She has the sweetest soul. She is my girl. I miss all her kind ways. Every morning before she would go out potty, she'd make sure we made a pit stop for a handful of mini tangerines first. Like she wasn't going to go outside until she got that treat. She is family. We need her home. She has a shiny coat up her back, but she is missing a tooth on the top side of her mouth. She sleeps on her back. She is not an outside flock. Last seen on Sunday around 3 p.m. near Sheridan House on Academy Way in Blue Hills, Michigan. If you see her or have her, call Elmo Sheridan at 571-252-3909. You won't get in trouble. Lost Fox, if found, call Elmo Sheridan.
Yeah, so I wanted to see that actually space that uses something very straightforward as a way of communicating, but then there's some gaps somewhere there. Elmo Saarinen, people who know about Saarinen would kind of be alerted by that, but others might not even not even notice. As you know, this is the entrance to the Saarinen house on campus, and that's where the next print lived. So I was very actually interested if, you know, they have this tour of the house and talk about Saarinen. I asked the people in the house to actually house the print without saying anything. So I was hoping that in the middle of the tour, one of the 10 people who take it would say, like, and what about these folks there? Like, did Saarinen know about it or something? And I'm very interested in that dimension of reality that almost like I think we all live in this kind of pre-made reality that kind of mostly is structured by kind of, or constructed by kind of emblematic big things that you can't do anything about. They're just there and they're like oversized and you kind of have to cope with that sort of like a structure. And then within that, once you're, I mean, there is actually a lot of freedom and agency and autonomy once you start kind of like gaining some kind of proximity or some, I'll show you, sometimes gaining proximity is not just getting closer or being inside something. Sometimes it's actually when you fly above it or something, actually you need to be far enough to see it. But whatever it is, whatever is that kind of altering your distance from the kind of habituated one that you have in your daily life, gives a lot of free space. And I feel like artists are masters of that in general. Sometimes you can do that within a painting or a print. Doesn't have to be some exotic kind of activity but I love that kind of moment when you can actually almost like give yourself or others a break from that sort of structuralism around you. So if the Saarinen house is about the womb chair and the Kramburg and all that sort of, you know, having a fox there, it's kind of nice, you know, because you have to somehow, maybe you can ask the guide, but you also sometimes have to answer to yourself. What is that doing there? And I feel like the sign and outside and the print inside this luxurious environment that both belong to their spaces are kind of almost like a pair. They work in kind of in tandem. It was amazing to work with the print media department on this. It was just, yeah, Cooper, thank you so much for that. It was kind of real, I don't know, piece that was actually supported by how people work here. Talking about flying, I'm going to show a piece that it's definitely oversized, and it's called Learn How to Fly Over a Very Large Larry, also an old piece, that actually began this work with a crop sign with a likeness of Larry King, the TV journalist, who some of you might already missed as a kind of a figure, but it was a very important TV news kind of personality, the heart of CNN at some point. He brought the direct response, like in real time from radio. So he was one of the first TV journalists who actually can call the program Larry King Live program. And he would be talking to Madonna and some general from one of the wars. And they're like, what are they doing on the same, but whatever, that he would do this kind of combos of impossible kind of people to meet at the other time together. And then somebody would be calling from like live and asking Madonna something, you know, like some random, and then the general would answer. So it was like, for me, like some Beckett meets Fellini kind of like incredible kind of absurd and also really strange. So anyway, I made a crop sign with a Larry King's likeness and take some flying lessons over it. So the piece is 700 feet by 300 feet, crop sign. And the suspenders themselves are just 40 feet broad, you know, this kind of really, these avenues.
How to set you off, do you think?
Well, you know, it's such an ego
it's such an ego-driven disease. So these an alcoholic in the thrust of his disease can make just about anything about himself. So possibly, but it was a healthy time for me.
I'm going to give you something for you. You were 33 years old, right?
33. That's right.
I'm going to give you. We never give this.
Uh-oh.
I'm going to give you a pair of braces.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Right here.
The ones off your back?
From the show.
Great. I will wear them when I'm sleeping tonight?
Well, Matthew.
I don't know. But
wear them in an elevator. Wear them on an episode.
Wow.
Wear them in a movie.
Look at that. The suspenders.
Okay.
All right.
You ever have a crop circle done for you?
No.
Well, here's what happened with me, but something amazing I want to show you. I've gotten many tributes over the years. This could be the biggest yet, literally. Take a look at this. It's a 300-foot by 200-foot crop circle, design of me in a field of hay in East Madison, Maine. It's actually a work of art by Daniel Bozkov. He used plywood to flatten down the hay, and he calls this thing, Learn How to Fly Over a Very Large Larry. I am humbled, and I wish to thank Daniel Bozkov, and I know that, Matthew, you are raging with envy that you do not have a crop circle.
Daniel, you might want to do something better with your free time, my friend. Okay? Call up, we'll figure something out.
That is a little weird, isn't it?
I'm uncomfortable. But glad you enjoy it.
You told me that tonight you're going to go watch Serving Sarah.
Yeah.
Nice to get an advice from a friend, And, it's interesting with these works because when you do something that kind of operates in this kind of larger sort of like unpredictable space, the darkness that surrounds us keeps kind of, so when you take this moment and now expand it into how Matthew Perry actually died and all that, so it's kind of extra things are always sort of like added to the original meaning of the piece. And something happens in that whole kind of slippery trajectory of what this whole thing means in a way. I'm very interested in that type of evading capture. I presented the work at the Andrew Krebs Gallery in New York. There was a large sofa. This sofa is actually 15 feet long, and it goes into perspective. So you can see how the woman who sits in the back is actually not very large, but the person in the front is actually much larger, but they get kind of reconstructed in space so the whole suite is in perspective. Few paintings of pivotal moments. I also asked I found a local woman and wanted to make this kind of botanical survey of the site. I wanted to see what kind of plant species live on this kind of large field, and just to unpack the next kind of dimension of it in a weird way. Milkweed, of course, vetch, goldenrod. This is the person who helped me kind of identify and an amazing woman. I'll tell you actually more when you hear her speak. Or should I tell you now? Yeah, maybe I should tell you now. She's, again, a local person who, to me, the way she speaks and the way she kind of presents herself almost looks like a pioneer settler of like 1600, Lots of Scottish people who came to the area very quickly knew everything about the plants and every sort of, how do you use it, how do you cook it or whatever for illness and all that. She talks in this kind of very interesting way, which maybe I should say after you hear her.
This is milkweed. These are milkweed pods, and where the milkweed fluff lives. And when it's mature, the pods open up and the fluff flies away. When spring comes around, one can find milkweed shoots coming up. They're about this high. They look like teeny tiny asparagus, and the leaves are all folded up on each other. Those shoots are good to pick and boil in water, and they're very good as a spring green. You do want to use moderation in eating milkweed, but if you start out eating them a little bit, they can be very nutritious. You just want to get them when they're young because they don't taste good when they're older. Milkweed combined with a plant called marshmallow, taken in a tincture form, a few drops a day, is very good for kidney and gallbladder problems, especially for dissolving gallstones. The milkweed plant is very good for cordage. The outer bark is dried and twisted together to make a string. It's quite strong, actually.
So you can make a string out of them.
Yes. Yeah, you strip this outer portion of the stem. And the fluff, Steve, can I see the box a minute? This is what the fluff looks like. Oh, I need the other one, Steve, sorry.
Is that dry one?
Yeah, the dry one, this one. This is what milkweed fluff looks like when it's mature. It's very silky and soft, just gorgeous.
Right.
This can be used to help start fires. If one is making any type of fire, it's very good to use in a bow drill or hand drill fire when you're making a tinder bundle to make your little coals sit inside. Early settlers collected milkweed fluff and spun it as one would spin cotton or wool, and they used that milkweed string to make candle wicks.
Oh, right.
It was very widely used for that purpose.
So it was a kind of amazing experience. Like for several hours, me, the owner of the field, and the naturalist, we kind of walked around and identified as much as we could. And here the whole, actually, this other dimension opens up because her name is Grace. And she, at that time, was working as a local 911 emergency operator. So if you're there and then you're in trouble, maybe her voice you hear in a time of real kind of, when you need it. And to me, that almost like brought this strange kind of moment where at some point, like we're in the field and talking about stuff, and at some point she said, you know what, she called it sculpture, you know, the crop sign. Because she said that I didn't cut any of the plants while I was doing that. I basically pressed with this piece of plywood, and most of them came back basically after. So nothing really died in the process of making it. So she said, she was commenting on that, basically saying you kind of, so she said something like usually fields like that or surrounded by woods are kind of micro systems by themselves. They have this kind of microclimate and a kind of exchange that happens between everything that's there. So if there is an intruder in the system, first like the birds would know it, and then the plants would know it, and then the rocks would know it, and whatever else is there would know it. So if you come with that kind of like a intention or kind of act that starts kind of like rubbing into the system or kind of like kind of dismantling it, something would answer back. A system like that kind of protects itself. And anyway, but again, she said, like, because you didn't cut anything, you're okay. Like, that, you know, that they didn't harm you back. And I had this kind of, for me, this amazing sort of, how to say, overlap between if Larry King is one end of the American paradigm, that kind of oversized, information travels fast, kind of like character. On the other end, maybe, is this kind of like a local person that actually, according to her, in her version, she talks to the milkweed and kind of tells you it's fine, like, you're okay, you know. And for me, that type of encounter that does that actually allows for almost like this idea that once you cut 45 degrees below the radar in the cultural kind of where things are like placed, sometimes you realize that actually the whole composition of reality is actually different. This thing that you thought it's just kind of like doesn't exist, it's actually most important, and this other thing that is the most visible is actually just a fold into the kind of empty nature of you know, of reality in a way too. That's also part of it. So for me, that was that kind of learning project. I going to show 2 more things for the sake of time and boredom and stuff. So I'll have to skip something. So sorry to move really fast here. I want to show you this also though. I'll show just 2 minutes of this piece. I won't talk a lot about it. It's basically, I worked for the Sao Paulo Biennial with a blind ballerina, Veronica, and I didn't know that blind ballerina, classical ballerina, is even possible as a form, because it's a very high form, it's a very tight form. You need to learn a lot of kind of your body changes. So how do you do it if you don't see? It's kind of real mystery, but they have a way that actually in Sao Paulo there is a company, Fernanda Bianchini company for blind people. And Veronica told me, this is not Veronica, by the way, this is another ballerina in New York that I did the sketches for the piece with. But Veronica told me in Brazil that she would have never become a ballerina because she comes from a very poor family, and it's sort of early on the television, she would see a ballerina when she was like 6. Because she's blind, she became blind, she was not born blind. So saw a ballerina and thought that this is like some inhuman kind of like above human kind of being that kind of defies gravity or something, and she thought of herself, I would never be able to do that. So once she was in this accident and became blind, she was actually found this company, and basically she became ballerina because of that unfortunate kind of shift in her life. So the piece, oh man, there's so much to say. Which part of it I can tell without? The piece is called My Dear Highly Venomous. And this portion that I'm going to show you, and I'll leave it like that with completely incomplete information about it, but it actually happens in the lab of Mande Holford, and Cornell University has a section in New York called Weill Cornell Medical Center. So Dr. Mande Holford works with venom, and she makes out of the venom of this sea snail, extracts the venom and makes it into one of the, almost like there is no other drug that's more potent than that. It's 1,000 times more potent than morphine, and it's not addictive. And the only trouble with that, of course, is it only is administered in very, very hard cases of like late cancer or something, when the pain is. So it's administered directly in the spine. So it's that world of anesthesia. And so for this sketch, we are basically, Mande Holford allow us to be in her lab and move me and the ballerina and a Roomba, what do you call this? Like a robot. We can turn a bit the volume here because this one is very quiet. A little bit, and then we'll turn it down again. Thank you. The piece involved making a flute that can be played by two people. But we won't get that part of the story because it's very intense and also time. Yeah, I want to show you another quick piece that for making the object, I worked with a Czech Alexander who actually made the notorious trumpet that Dizzy Gillespie used. You know, that crooked trumpet that he has. Cooper, I might not be able to show this one. Well, I don't know how we're doing with the time. I'll run this very quickly then. Istanbul Biennial in the 205 or something. Istanbul is full of this sort of, every corner sells this amazing kind of fresh pretzels called simits. And my project was basically to go and become an apprentice in a bakery and learn how to make the pretzels and then make few new forms based on words that my mother, Turkish words that my mother knew. I'm born in Bulgaria. The town I grew up was like actually 3 or 4 hours from Istanbul, but during the communism and that was like a very contested border. So Istanbul was like, never you'll be able to go. So none of us in our generation had been there until the whole thing kind of changed. So for me, it was like a surprising how it was full of all these things of, Bulgaria was part of the Ottoman Empire. So it's kind of like it has this kind of culture embedded in it. Basically the colonial, one of the colonial places for the Ottoman Empire. So again, I went with my mother there. She would keep kind of picking these words there, and she would say, "Oh, that means fountain," or "That means kind of 2 dogs," or something. So for the piece, I made shapes that are kind of based on her words. We made a bag that talks about the project in 3 languages and pictograms. I was selling it on the street, the new pretzels, and there were all sorts of kind of like, most people wouldn't notice, like any other cart. This is during the time when she would say like this means that.
Това е подарък. Ще купим на Роза един арбаган. Башка.
Какво значи башка?
Отделно.
Do you know what is bashka in Turkish? When you say bashka, is there a word bashka?
Bashka is different.
Различно значи.
Да, не отивам на други места.
Други.
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 На друго място.
Други. Башка.
Браво. Checking her Turkish. Как се казва?
Майтап.
Какво значи майтап?
Е турска дума и значи смешно.
Смешно. What does it mайтап mean in Turkish? Mайтап. Is there mайтап? Is there a Turkish word mайтап?
Mайтap, there is some word mайтap, but
means what?
You know, when you make fun with the fire. I mean, you make the fire something.
Oh, so it's not a funny thing. It's mайтап doesn't mean like when you have fun.
I mean, it's mайтap is
when you laugh at something, no?
Something laughing, something enjoy.
Значи нещо смешно, което се... Да.
It's actually some of the most amazing sculpture lessons I took in this bakery, because the master baker would take your hands and tell you, no, you have to cut it here. And while in the back somebody is like working while sleeping, just kind of automatically. Bread is an amazing material. So this is every pretzel for the last 500 years in Istanbul look like that. It's kind of very general kind of twisted form, fresh out of the oven with sesame. It's a great snack. Now this is fountain, eye, curtain, tail, cloth, 2 dogs, and gift. Those shapes, the new shapes we invented that kept producing it, the bakery now is maybe, this is exactly 20 years ago now, the bakery, some of them were selling so well, the bakery keeps making them. The only one bakery kind of in Istanbul keep making this shape. So that was like one of these projects that kind of like you throw it in this vast sea of, Istanbul is like New York that existed for 3,000 years. It's sort of like a ultimate cosmopolitan place, But, and, part of it is also homogeneous, and some things are the way they are, Suddenly having that kind of tiny scratch within that, is what this project was about. Yeah, we'll miss things. Now, this I want to really tell you about because, maybe for 5 minutes. How are we doing with time? What's our kind of time limit? People who know about the 10 more minutes? Okay. Awesome. This is an example how one kind of actually reuses and remix kind of older work, and that work becomes even more, I don't know, it has this kind of potentially provocative. But anyway, the old piece here is Darth Vader tries to clean the Black Sea with Brita filter. It was a television piece, which I, again, did in Bulgaria and bought television time, so a slow-moving Darth Vader was scooping water from the Black Sea, one of the most polluted areas in the world, by the way, uncleanable, and sort of pouring the trickled water into another bottle, then pouring the water back into the ocean. And anyway, it was played among other commercials, so where all this active language that usually of ads kind of like shouts at you, this was actually very peaceful. Only you hear the kind of the water, basically. I tried to show you as video. I mean, it was basically shown on television. So when you flip to the channels, all of a sudden you arrive at that. But then as a video, didn't make sense. You know, somehow it was weird. It didn't work. But as an image, I felt like I've shown it several times as a photograph, and it has a kind of, it's almost it continues better than the video itself. So good kind of understanding of maybe what context does to the work and how it extends and how it changes it. So the original piece is 2000. This is in 21 in May 7th. Now almost like 4 years ago exactly, or a few more days. Elon Musk retweeted that work. And he wrote, I don't know if you can see enough, but Elon is on the head of Darth Vader. And the memes that are in the general ocean, they go through the Brita filter, which he names his Twitter feed. And then basically, so he holds the purifying element. Anyway, that was, at that time, Elon Musk, 21 was more like Tesla, you know, there were some sort of, I started looking at his Mars X program, you know, it's a SpaceX program, and started encountering this weird kind of like visions of a new colony in Mars that actually would, by 2050, will have a colony of 1 million humans there, because the rockets start moving almost as a shuttle at 2030. He and his engineers invented an engine that's actually capable to go to Mars and come back, you know, number of times. So it's not so that by itself is kind of a revolution, and that there is no other engine at all on that level, you know. It's called V-Raptor 2. Anyway, at that time it's like okay, what is he doing? And then now, quickly coming back to our reality, this is all of a sudden completely different sort of, somebody with completely different role, you know, in our lives. But I feel like here, with at least as far as Darth Vader is concerned, it's almost like a prediction, you know, like saying, I'm the Darth Vader, and I'm going to do it, you know, like some weird kind of assignment or something, yeah, anyway. So I'll go along the piece very quickly, because this piece has a number of kind of variety dimensions. It's basically, the main structure of it is 5-day-long opera. And in this case, opera is, I'm understanding it as a kind of, not as only as a musical performance, but it's more like in Italian, opera means also work and labor, also means trouble. So more like in that sense of this kind of field of actions and people that are kind of, and it got presented as a musical performance as well. But briefly, and I'll probably skip faster than usual here, but Occupy is a word that comes from Occupy Wall Street, very far, the original vision of these people who tried to, they invented the word 1% that we use now, failed badly. If you ask some people, like, didn't do anything, but then maybe a lot of changes are kind of happening through them as well. Now we're more in that reality, of course. It's almost hard to talk about it. It's like now this is really bigger than how can one even kind of address it or talk about it. So anyway, my idea was like to have this proposal in the form of 5-day-long opera, that it's actually, the proposal is growing cucumbers on Mars. And the previous years I grew cucumbers, so I was kind of already fired up. Cucumbers are amazing things and beings to deal with, you know. So anyway, it happened in a number of places. The libretto of the opera actually was meant to follow the growth of 3 cucumber gardens in 3 parts of the world. One was in Gabrovo, Bulgaria. The other one is in my house in Nyack. I have like a extensive small gardens that I experiment with lots of plants and vegetables. And the third place was in Cornell University in a very hardcore scientific environment, you know. So here, this is in Bulgaria, planting a few cucumbers. People have an extensive knowledge about that kind of folk knowledge about growing. So the idea there was to kind of somehow ask about that. How do you grow, you know? And the whole thing became this something I call Cucumber Know-How Exchange Cafe, because there was a local sort of coffee kiosk, a bench, a bus stop, and we planted this garden next to it. So people naturally congregate, and by the time they see somebody growing, you know, there is always somebody who says like, no, you don't do it this way. It's kind of, you tie it like that and you have to, you know, so that was that kind of a site for that. Number of times I invited musicians to play to the cucumbers. The early experiments in the 70s, University of Irvine made a particular kind of like even categorization of what music plants prefer or some plants prefer, and they grow really well. So it was that kind of several concerts with public, but basically the musicians were playing to the cucumbers, like addressing and facing them. And in the meantime, NASA keeps sending sort of, you know that there are at least 2 rovers still there. And also, there is so much interference and everything. So Mars is still this kind of we have some kind of glimpse of what's there, but it's also very far away still. In the process of growing the cucumbers in Bulgaria, I worked with fortune tellers. This is the first fortune teller, which later became the kind of the instigator for the aria of the first fortune teller. So just to say again, the libretto of the opera was actually growing with the cucumber gardens. I didn't know what the text is like. The libretto came from the problems around the garden, the 3 gardens. I'm really skipping here just to kind of, I don't know if you know, I mean, this is actually on Mars. There is a penny on Mars next to some of the things that delivered by the rovers, and this is the penny after one of the kind of sandstorms. It gives a scale to things, but kind of strange to imagine it there as well, and also what the penny is now. For the cucumbers in Bulgaria, we also brought a couple of beehives to kind of pollinate. This is the beekeeper, and I kind of had wonderful conversations, and he actually produced honey from the cucumber patch, very tasty. And again, in the meantime, things are happening there. This is the second fortune teller, the area of the second fortune teller. The 2 fortune tellers were very different. The first one needed beans, other kind of coffee cup, and all sorts of tools. The second fortune teller, this kind of amazing woman, I mean, I brought some cucumbers just to kind of see if we can use some kind of like object to talk about it. But my question to the fortune tellers was like would Mars mission succeed, and what will happen to it? And would my project succeed, or what will happen to it as well? And we had very interesting answers. The first one was very complex. I'm not going to repeat it now. The second one was more like you go and talk to him because he's doing what he's doing and you're still thinking, you know. So her advice was more like, go and get in touch with Elon Musk and I don't know what else, like what stopped him to do. I mean, it was that kind of like unfinished advice, but urgent, like you gotta get in touch. In the context of the opera, this became, I'll show you, I work with a composer, Aaron Gee, who is a vocalist, and this is one of the arias. It's a whispering opera, it's not a...
Fortune Teller 2.
That might need a bit more volume if possible. Enya. 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 Second site in Nyack. Lovely when you grow cucumbers, but now in the context of the opera, the first antagonist kind of appeared and kind of ate most of the leaves. So in Nyack, we didn't have a crop. Cornell University has probably one of the most amazing plant sciences department in the world, because a very, kind of Ivy League university with all the means and all the research money is actually surrounded by, I don't know how many local farms that are enormous in that area. And if you're a crazy scientist and make some experiment on something having to do with plants, there is a farmer there as crazy as you who is ready to test it like in 1,000 acres. Like a, so it has this strange kind of very rigorous. And yeah, here's the fields of the world. I won't tell you that, but the people here, Johannes Lehmann is one of the world top authorities on soil. And Margaret Bow, who we are in conversation with them along the lines of the project. He told me a lot about soil and how, again, there are many aspects there to talk about. Here is Johannes making biochar, his whole biochar collection, his PhD student, Morgan Irons, who considers herself astrobiologist. She's the first person who sent soil actually in space to see what would change if you, so a lot of soil that she produced spent about a year and a half at the International Space Station. And this is the process of us trying to grow cucumbers in something called Mars regolith simulant, which is a basically crushed rock from Mojave Desert that tries to mirror the information we have about the substrate that covers the surface on Mars. Pretty much dead matter. It's rock, crushed rocks, so nothing can grow there until you start kind of turning into soil. After 4 generations, we finally managed to actually produce crop, and that's like a proper scientific experiment that actually worked. These are some of the cucumbers we produced, and they're called after all the rovers on Mars. So we basically produce 9 or 11 altogether. Cucumbers, each one had a personal name and a personal kind of like shape. And then with the old friend, the glassmaker in Austin, we made these bottles that were made for each individual cucumber, kind of shaped exactly the way that particular cucumber curved. And then we used those things to pickle them. This is the installation at Neuberger Museum that the first time the 5-day long opera kind of presented itself. Very big curtain of 33 feet by 9 feet, had images from the whole process and kind of sewn, like printed on canvas, sewn into it, and then embroidered on top of it. Quickly, for a minute, just the music. So this was part of the environment when you enter that room. This fragment of the music that Aaron Gibb produced is called Mars as Mineral Consciousness. Yeah, this we have to skip quickly. This is a very important part of the project. Kiwi Nguyen is here. Thank you, Kiwi. We worked together on the garments for the opera, some of the singers. So those garments would be kind of displayed on the wall. And then when people want to actually sing, they will take them off the wall. From objects, they become suddenly kind of embedded structure. Q and I, unfortunately, was not in the same place, but we met on Zoom. We together discussed the design of them, and then he was, at that time, going to Vietnam, so he was able to take materials to Vietnam and actually sew them there. So it was like a fantastic alignment of, I still think this is one of the most interesting part of the project for me. He is one of the singers singing to Darth Vader, wearing one of the garments. So basically the presentation was this kind of like Brownian movement of like some people were there to sing. Some people were there and as a viewer, but there were things to read so you can actually read out loud. So it was that kind of like a structure of and I think I should stop here, finally. If you have any...
Make the best possible work you can.
We'll stop this. Can we turn the lights on, if possible, so that if anybody, I mean, maybe it's too long already. Oh my God, yeah. Okay, so we need to, yeah, so that's okay.
5 minutes of Q&A.
Yeah, one question if somebody has any.
Hello. Thank you so much for the talk.
Hi,
I'm back here.
Oh, hi.
Hi. I was wondering when you are like approaching places, or like I was thinking about when you were at UT Austin, like how do these opportunities come about for you? Do you go to an institution with an idea? Do they present you an opportunity? Do you come up with an idea like in the place where it happens? Or like how does that process generally happen for you?
In Austin particularly, it was a very strange thing because like a bunch of artists, like 4 or 5 artists and 4 or 5 scientists were invited at that time in basically 2014. In Moscow, in Russia, they were building an institute called Skolkovo, which supposedly would have mirrored Silicon Valley. It was that kind of grand scale on a president level. Not Putin, you know, Medvedev was at that time, and when Putin came back to power, got rid of that project altogether. But it was very kind of huge scale Russian thing. And we were invited, and we met with the scientists there, and then the project kind of like got pulled out and we couldn't do anything there. But one of the scientists was Brian Corgo. So Brian was able to, oh, we should do this. I mean, we already thought about it. Like, let's do it in UT, and I'll find some like minuscule money for it just to kind of. So he was able to actually convince the president to kind of fund it. But again, that was not the project yet. That was more like an opportunity for a project. And then it happened from there. So basically, it was one open-minded person who enjoyed the conversations between artists and scientists and kind of had the weight to pull it through in the institutional chops to kind of convince the administration to spend money on something like that. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your talk. That was awesome.
Thank you.
You know, there's something about the way that you're using humor. It's like the effect of you pairing things that are incongruous, as you said, you know, has this effect of disarming or like becoming humorous. And I was wondering if you wanted to speak more specifically about that as like a role in play and like how you see that functioning in the work.
That's a great question. It's in the heart of the work, but it's also, I feel like, you know, it's amazing thing with humor. If you try to make something funny, it never works, right? So it's meaning, at least I can't. You know, there's some stand-up comedian or other people maybe work with that material all the time. But I feel like, in my case, it's more like recognizing the absurdity of the situation, which is like the absurdity surrounds us. And I come from a part of the world where that kind of natural skepticism, some of the founders of Dada are just right next door. So it's part of a kind of like, it's a particular eye for life's kind of strange kind of impossibilities that surround us. And then it becomes also a coping mechanism. It's sort of like you have to see that angle in order to, that's part of the agency. How do you transcend it? How do you take one thing and actually, what type of opportunity you have there to kind of change it? So it's somewhere there, that question for me. Less about intentionally creating a like funny structure or humorous, whatever. It's more like seeing those things around and kind of almost like highlighting them or taking them on. Does that answer it? Yeah, thank you. Thank you.